Next panel is about growing a community. And I want to first go back to what Gun said yesterday in the kickoff speech. This whole thing is not possible without you guys, because you guys are part of our community, and this is why we're doing everything. And thank you for showing up and making this whole thing work for all of us. So without further ado, when I thought about community, my background was I was a tech investor first, and I got to meet some great people and study Web2 and invested in some great companies. And then I went into Web3 as an operator. This is my second firm. But the one commonality that people don't realize is that community, this concept of community has been in existence since Web 1 even, and Web 2. So I thought about who can I bring on to this platform that can share their stories in Web 2 and how it relates and how it's different from Web 3 community. So I called upon, in truth, full disclosure, Imran Khan, a good friend of mine. Imran was one of the top research analysts in the early 2000s in internet. He was very important and instrumental in the proselytizing of people to go into the internet and try it. Because in the early 2000s, people still thought the World Wide Web, we're not sure how long this is and what all the good utility will be. Then he went on as a banker. He took some of the biggest companies in the space public, like Alibaba. He was constantly being quoted on the Wall Street Journal for taking all the best companies public. Then he decided to do that from an internal perspective, and he was in the C-suite, the chief strategy officer of Snapchat, where he took Snapchat from 0 revenues to over 3 billion, about 70 employees to, what, 3,000 employees? And ultimately IPO'd Snapchat, with Evan Spiegel. Today, he's now CEO of Verishop, which is one of the up and growing fastest social e-commerce sites. I'll let him talk a little bit about that. And then I thought, from the Web3 perspective, why not bring in our own Jay, who is our VP of marketing, and he's been working his butt off to make all of this possible. So I want to give him a hand for all the hard work. Jay's background, he went and did the traditional agency route. So he was more of a traditional marketing type guy. And then he went on to Fluidity, Aeroswap, where he was in the marketing group there. And then, with a lot of hard work, we convinced him to join us, and he's done an incredible job, and he's part of the reason why this all happens. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask Imran a question first, because we'll go with the age over beauty. Let's talk about when we were talking about community, and you're asking about how this whole thing happened, how there's so many people here, and I told you that because Web3 is about community, you reminded me that so was Web 1 and Web 2, and you had this great framework for thinking about how to build a community. Can you share that?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's great to be here and great to see the energy. I think this is my first conference in 2.5 years. So really, really great to get out of home and what we went through. So, I think the concept of community, I think anytime you want to change anything, significant change, whether it's a political factor or societal factor or even in the business, you need to build community. And you need to build this community from grassroots. And, I think, one of the things that I always studied that what gets a community going, no matter whether it's a political community, religious community, or business community, what are the incentives that people need to join a community? And when John asked me to talk about Web 2.0 versus Web 3.0, I think, technology-wise, there is obviously incredible difference what Web 3.0 is doing. But in terms of fundamental bringing the community, I think in many ways there are a lot of similarities. And in what I found over the years, that there are 3 things that drive, creation of community. One is shared interest. In this case, you guys have a shared interest about democratizing the finance. Web 2.0, when I was at Snapchat, the shared interest was using a messaging app that disappeared. that you can actually have a free conversation, that your conversation doesn't get recorded, and that say shared interest could be a societal movement you can drive. The second thing I find that drives a community is recognitions. Primarily, I think it's become very, very important in a Web 3.0 world where you actually need, we saw that with Web 2.0, right? Because if you look at the platforms like Snap or Facebook or Instagram, you have these creators who are bringing a lot of people. 99% of them are doing it because they want to get recognized for creating a content. Same thing with Twitter. And then the third one is some sort of financial incentive, right? That's why people join a community, that what is that compensation factor. So in many ways, I think, obviously everything has their own nuances, but if you look at fundamental philosophical level, when we look at community, I always look for, are we driving some sort of special interest? Are we bringing together a group of people with special interest? Are we giving people the recognition? And third, are we giving some sort of financial incentive? So that's the way I think about it.
Excellent. So common belief or common thread. Number two, recognition of the community. And number three, some sort of incentive mechanism. Jay, what do you think in the Web3? Does that apply?
Yeah, I think with Web3, it definitely applies. The main complexity with Web3 is how we use the technology and the community platforms that we're given. Especially with, I'm sure everyone in this room probably has way too many Telegram channels to manage or way too many Discords. That's another hurdle to absolutely have to overcome. How do you touch every single community member in the most effective way possible? That's the question I ask. So that may be something as simple as, hey, let's just answer the simple questions that come up in the community. How do I set up a MetaMask wallet? How do I use the Avalanche blockchain? And you can continue to scale that up a little bit more, but I think you can start from the ground first to really identify what makes most sense with what's most impactful with your audience. So for us, with Avalanche, early days, I'm sure some of you were probably here even prior to the ICO or even prior to mainnet launch. It was very much a lot of us, John, myself, and a bunch of the older employees at this firm, we were all in the community channels talking to people directly. Of course, once we become a global platform, that's no longer scalable. But I still think the touch points that we're giving can be replicated in some system or some fashion. So scalability, like with blockchains in community, is also very important. So whether that's staffing it up, whether that's also organizing the community channels in a way that's discernible, or maybe it's something else where you can use external resources. So really understanding your user. And if you come back to the events strategy with what we're doing here, we're really trying to create an amazing experience. That's the main goal. When someone comes up to me and says, what's a measure of success? If you guys walk home and say, wow, Avalanche Summit was an amazing experience, that's a win for us. And I think as we continue to learn and really understand, there's plenty of feedback that's probably going to be given by all of you guys. We want to make sure that we're not making the same mistakes. And as long as you guys, as the community members and of course the key community members in the ecosystem, feel like they're heard, then that's a really successful, strong community. And from there, it's really a much easier place to go once you have the base, like with any growth strategy.
So Jay, you started off that by answering, to start off building a good community, you need a good distribution channel. Some of the distribution channels we're all familiar with, like Telegram, kind of grew up with the blockchain crypto space. Imran, in your situation at Snapchat or Snap, your distribution was your biggest competitor. You were second player to the market. How did you get your community? Did you have to use Facebook, your biggest competitor, to grab community?
No, that's the power of Snapchat, right? Because Snapchat never used anybody to really drive distribution. Our distribution was our community, right? And I think one of the things that I used to say, and actually I learned it from Evan, that to keep a customer, if you go back, what is the incentive of Snap was to build that community, was connecting you with your real friend and have a real authentic conversation, right? And we would see that, again, this is a few years old data, so with that caveat, we would see that the customer retention, our user retention, would go up significantly higher if we could connect one user with 3 friends. And if you look at early days, it was true actually for Snapchat, Facebook also, that they had this 7 friends philosophy, that if you can connect to, follow 7 friends, your retention rate would go up. I think one of the interesting things that and again, I would love to hear audience feedback or even your feedback, that a lot of the Web 3.0 community building is actually happening in a Web 2.0 platform. So I think maybe we need a social platform for Web 3.0.
Oh, Jay, you're the perfect person to answer or comment on that.
Well, I think we do need one, but it's a lot trickier of a problem, I think, to solve. You can't just pick up Twitter's model and put it on chain and call it a day. We've seen that happen, and we've seen it not work. I think there's plenty of mechanisms, including spam prevention. How do you champion those who are doing good? How do you punish those if you do want to punish them for doing bad in terms of submitting like poor quality content and things like that? And so all these complexities, I think the project that comes to mind, there was a project back in like 2017. I think it was basically like a Web3 Reddit. But what it ended up doing was it basically incentivized users to try and maximize their financial gain by figuring out ways to upvote the system and basically defraud the platform. So I think people have really tried. I think Ava is doing something interesting. I actually haven't seen their product yet, but I know they've been working on something. So I think it's more of a whoever figures out the complexities of how humans interact and all of the potential issues that might arise from those interactions, that's the platform that'll probably be the one that wins. But I think it's also something that won't be like a golden ticket solution. It'll probably take time, and of course, iterations on chain are much harder than centralized systems. So I think those are kind of the problem points that I see, at least between now and kind of this Web3 social platform future.
Got it. Interesting. Jay, this one's for you. You have a mechanism that Web2 people, in terms of incentive, that Web2 people don't have. How important is that token?
I think the token is, of course, very important. I think it also creates a lot of complexities, really understanding how to use it to your benefit, but also not to lean on it too much. I think a lot of projects, when they think about incentive programs, they think that's their ticket to success. And I think it's much more than that. It's really focusing on the product and the value propositions that you have at your core. You'll always find me saying UX because that ultimately will then make the experience much more easy for everybody. And that way, there's stickiness to the product. If there's 10 different hoops you have to follow through and you've launched an incentive program, of course, the incentive program will probably move progress partially, but it won't completely achieve your goals because eventually the incentives will die down and the product is not at the capacity that you want it to be, and you'll probably lose that base kind of, I guess, user base, if you will. So I tend to compare it to ride-sharing platforms. Think about early ride-sharing days. Uber, Lyft, there's a bunch of others that don't exist anymore. They all went into doing their own DeFi incentive program, if you will, but just for riders. And now you can see which ones lasted the longest, the ones that had the best user experience and got people what they really wanted.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Sometimes you just go past the incentives and it's about the usability and the value of the product.
Yep, absolutely.
And easily understanding the value of the product. I think one of the things I observed, again, I'm the old guy in this room, stuck in a Web 2.0 world, is that, I think, if you look at the financial market, right, where I grew up, and the stocks that did really, really well, like I remember, this is a true story. In 2006, I was in Boston. I was a research analyst, and covering internet stocks. And I went to see a big money manager who owned probably $1 billion worth of Google stock. And he was asking me, can you explain to me? Now remember, he owns $1 billion worth of Google stock. And he was asking me, how does Google make money? And I was really explaining to him, how does Google make money? But the key thing is, if you look at all these tech companies, every company is complicated, right? Google's, monetization model was fairly complex at that time. They came out with the second bid concept that was not a very well-known concept at that time, and second bid auction concept. But the reality is, I think what they have done a really good job, dummy down the story. And it's not about internet as a whole. It was a very simple story that, hey, more people are using internet. And as more and more companies came along on the internet, they came up with a very simple story that why I need to care about Facebook, why do I need to care about Snapchat, why do I need to care about Google. They're all kind of different, but they have a very simple story and explain it in a 1 line or 2 lines. The challenge I find in crypto world, yeah, it's kind of easy to explain Bitcoin, and then you start going down, it's kind of get overcomplicated. And now, if you want to have 1 billion people use the product, you got to dummy it down. It has to have a complexity. Obviously, everything has complexity. But the question is, how can you dumb it down in a way that resonate, going back to the 3 things we talked about, that people can recognize that it consistent with their shared belief, it drives their incentive program, it drives some sort of excitement on that. And that's the part I think still the industry needs to figure out, that if I ask, hey, what is this? It makes sense to an average person.
Jay, what is Avalanche so it makes sense for the average person? This community already knows, but it's being live streamed.
Yeah, so I mean, to really add to that idea, and I'll address that point too, is we're doing that exact strategy, or at least trying to, as quickly as possible. Now, you're never going to get it right the first time, so you'll find a lot of the different messaging and iterations that you've probably come across through Avalanche assets, whether that was early days where I think we focused a lot about transaction finality, but of course that's very technical for the end user. The average person, they don't care about the protocol at all. It's kind of like the analogy I always bring is TCP/IP. Think about back when the Web2 was really forming. I'm sure there were people like this, kind of like the people in this room maybe, but most people weren't saying, wow, TCP/IP, it's going to be revolutionary. This stuff's really going to change the world. Instead, people are saying, well, actually what I can do is I can order a book and it comes to my front door in 24 hours, Amazon. Another one is for Uber, for example. I can get from point A to point B just through my mobile phone. So I think right now, especially being a smart contracts platform, Avalanche just lets applications function in the way they should be. They make it work. That's really the end goal. And so if there are DeFi applications, GameFi applications, most people will be focused on that. So we're hoping that because the performance is so high for those applications, in turn, Avalanche will accrue value and more community members. But I think there has to be this proxy. I think we're really at that edge now where NFTs have kind of slingshotted us a little bit forward, and no longer does it really matter to say, oh, well, we're a proof of stake chain, or we have thousands of transactions per second, or we finalize transactions under 1 second. Some people might care, but not most.
So I think you did to me, I understand everything you said, and you went through many, many points, but I do think you broke Imran's rule. You did not stick to one sentence.
I did break it.
So why don't I take a shot of it? I'll start with, we fundamentally believe that the world's assets will be tokenized and put on a blockchain. I think everyone in this room agrees with that. And if everything is tokenized, economic value will be transferred. And that's why you guys are all here, because you recognize that in order to be part of the economic system and receive the value you create, you have to be in the crypto blockchain world. And the reason why you're part of Avalanche is because it's the fastest blockchain out there. So who doesn't want to receive their economic value the fastest? And you do it on Avalanche. So I hope that kind of summarizes a little bit.
Maybe we should take an audience vote, see if they agree with it.
Well, if this audience doesn't say, oh, there you go. Woo! So Imran, you took all your learnings from taking Alibaba public, your research analyst days, and proselytizing all the internet communities. Then you said, I'm going to take Snapchat public. And then you said, I'm going to take those skills and create a whole new thing called Verishop, a social e-commerce platform. What is it, and how do you build a community in a whole new area?
Yeah, I think I'm still learning. But I think, the whole concept behind Verishop was that I think one of the things that I observed, that when people talk about creators, they only think about creators like people who are digital content creators, right? So whether it's a TikTok creators and Instagram creators. But I think one of the interesting things happening is that creators or influencers, now they are also fragmenting based on your specialization. So, right, Twitter is a platform for people who has a strong opinion. They go to Twitter. People who actually are incredible creating short-form video, they actually go to TikTok. People who likes to do podcasts, they use either Spotify or Apple. You cannot take a Twitter creator and make them successful on TikTok. It's very different. And so I think, one of the interesting things that I think I'm observing is that the commerce is also incredibly fragmenting. So look at this way. Last year alone, just in the United States, 972,000 e-commerce website was created. Wow. So more and more people are building physical product. And we think the people who are building brands, they are the creator also. They may not know how to dance very well for a TikTok, or they may not be a most provocative tweet guys, but they're also building product with love and mission. So I think there was an interesting opportunity to build, because if you think about e-commerce, it's like the biggest e-commerce company is 25 years old. You go back to, it's a very editorial base, right? So I think there's an opportunity to build a platform that cater to these independent brand creators and connect them with their fans. So that's what we really want to do.
How do you get the fans? How do you get the buyers?
Yeah, so I think it starts with the, like in your platform, it starts with the developers, right? I think, in our case, it starts with the people who are creating those brands, right? If you have a community of incredible brand creators who are building amazing product and they're sharing their stories, then the users will come, because ultimately users will go, where there is value. Right? So I think going back to Ava Labs side, if you're building with the great developers, you're building great solution, users will come. Fastest solution is a reason for it.
Is there a demographic that you're going after for your users, your buyers?
I think, like commerce, unfortunately, it's a complete opposite of this audience. 80% are female. Most men, unless they're sneakers, they're probably not shopping.
Well, that actually reminds me of a story, actually a true story. So our company is based in Williamsburg, in Brooklyn, in New York, and I come into work one day. I'm literally just like, walking into work, and I peek over and I see Jay. Jay's sitting there. He's wearing a white T-shirt, and literally just all white.
Is that too much information we're sharing?
No. You have to listen to this. A white T-shirt with a little happy face over here. Just literally a happy face, just like two dots and a
It's a special
little mouth.
happy face.
So I look at him, it's like, oh, okay, so yeah, you got a white T-shirt and a happy face, that's cool. What is that? He tells me it's this Rag & Bones brand, and the guy paid $250 for a white T-shirt with them. So I'm thinking two things. One, either I pay this guy too much, or two, I'm gonna go buy like a pack of Hanes white T-shirts and a magic marker for all of $7 and draw 5 of these and charge them $200 for each one of these. Is this your target customer?
It is, because ultimately, but the thing is that why do people, and I think you raise a great point, and I think, that as you guys are building your product and your brand, that's really an interesting thing. Because at the end of the day, what is a brand? A brand is a promise. And this is a really interesting thing, that what he was paying, that $193 more for that promise, and I think this is why really core to building Verishop, because if there's a 972,000 brands getting created, they have 972,000 different promises, and you need a platform to tell those promises. And we have a lot of work to do. We're nowhere near there, but that's, building something takes a decade.
Yep.
But I think that's really important. And I think it's also really important for crypto world, going back to the world, that how can you make it simple? You need to communicate the promises. And I think, if I look at this room, we can definitely have a little bit more diversity, and I think that's why the messaging needs to get there so that it can appeal to a broader group of people.
I agree with you 100%. We're trying to make the community far more diverse. We're working on it every single day. We have a strong community. We want to continue to grow the community. But if you go to one of these Avalanche Summits versus any other summit, what you'll notice is this is actually very diverse. We have TradFi guys on one side. We have what I call double Ds, down, degen, double down kind of guys. So it's very hard to get like these, two groups together, and somehow we've been able to bring them all together because we have good product, we have good user experience, and the platform is just the fastest out there.
Absolutely, and I have a great leader like you, so.
Well, thank you,
And Jay.
thank you, thank you. Jay, do you want to say anything? How much do those ripped jeans cost? I can buy a whole bunch of jeans and just start ripping it up right now and charge you.
If anyone wants to talk fashion after this, I'm
going to
obviously
set up
down.
a store on Verishop and rip jeans and draw circle happy faces, and then I know I'll have at least one customer.
It'll be me. I think with our promise right now, like I said with the application side strategy, and really shifting towards the mainstream marketing, that's what you're seeing right now. You're seeing the events, you're seeing the Formula E team, you're seeing a few other things that'll probably come out tomorrow, just a hint. And some of those things are much more distanced from the actual protocol, if you will. They're much more relevant to the end user that might not be someone who comes to this event. They actually might be someone who is watching a Formula E race and might be interested in earning a little extra yield on their stablecoin, for example. And so I think we're really experimenting right now. Some of these things might not work as exactly as we intended, but I think that's something that's really healthy for us, especially as we feel like we're ahead of the pack, at least in the Web3 space, and so we can be taking these risks. And I think as long as we're taking these risks, doing it quickly, and of course then making sure that we're learning from those mistakes, if there are any, then I think we're going to be in a good place. So that's what you're seeing today. You're experiencing that firsthand, especially with this event, like I mentioned before. And so I cannot express this more. I'm super thankful and grateful to see this in person, and really appreciate everybody coming.
We won't always get it right, but we will listen to you, and we will iterate, and we'll make things better. Isn't that the right way to think about it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Imran, we don't have a little bit of time, so I want to ask you, especially with Snapchat, as that community grows bigger and bigger and bigger, how does that common thread continue to grow? Because you talked about diversity, and we're working on diversity in this room, but that thread is harder to bond everyone once you get bigger and different.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that, I think if you want to, like, one thing is constant in life, that is change, right? And, even if you have that same group of people, as they get older, their view about and philosophy will change. And so if you want to build a platform that can change with how the society change, how your audience change, how your product change. But I think, one of the most important thing is that, I think, and I know you guys do that, set up what is the core value of the company is, and really build around that core value, right? So at Snapchat, our core value was privacy. In Evan's credit, he was talking about privacy in 2012 when nobody talked about privacy. I remember I would go to investor meeting and people said, why can't you be more like Facebook? And I'll be like, I don't know, we're not Facebook. And so I think, whatever all the things we have done, we stuck with that core privacy thesis. But we built a lot of product and our audience changed, and I'll give you a perfect example. The early days of Snap was much difficult to use. As we had much older people, they needed even a little bit more intuitive product. They didn't want all this swiping left, right. That was the first, and it took us a time to change. There's a lot of resistance, and the path was not smooth. Everybody had some redesign hiccups and things like that. But the reality is, ultimately, we had to evolve. But the core principle was we wanted to create a platform that is privacy-centric. And I think, Avalanche has some great values, and I think we've got to stick with those values, but build product that's appealed to a broader group of people.
Thank you. That's a great point. I would be remiss to not create some sort of involvement from the crowd here, especially since it's rare to have such a luminary and such a successful entrepreneur like Imran here. I know I already talked to a few people today who are trying to build a decentralized social media platform. So I want to give that gentleman a chance to ask one question. But you have to ask it, and you have to scream it, because we can't hear you.
Yes, I can. I can. Yeah, so the question is, did everybody hear the question? So the question is, they're building a social network. What's the name of the platform? Pari.io. And the question is, do they need to financially incentivize everybody to join the community? Look, my philosophy is it's a little bit controversial, but I think if you give everybody money, people don't value it. People need to work and earn it, right? Just giving out handout doesn't really work. And so I think, if you look at, the other platform, people who really, build a community on top of that platform and create a much more loyal customer base, they start actually making money. As you look at some of the influencers actually making more money than big movie stars now. So I think the key thing is, yes, there has to be some sort of incentive, but the incentive has to be earned. Put it this way, and it's not even going to be a simple thing that I post something and I get paid. It has to be that you really build a community on top of your platform. And Web 3.0 is people building their own community, and if they do that, yeah, sure, they should be able to earn something. But there has to be a process, and it has to be hard earned. Thanks.
Well, I want to thank Imran. It's very hard to get him out of his busy schedule to share his wisdom and his experience. I want to thank Jay for being such a good sport. And most importantly, I want to thank our community. Thank you for coming out, and hope this was helpful.
Thanks.